Welcome to episode 135 of Destination Linux. This is a podcast of opinions made up of four of the greatest minds ever discussing our passion for Linux. I'm Ryan, and with me today are the Kool-Aid drinking fanboys of Linux, Noah and Michael, as well as a special guest host this week. Zeb is on holiday, so we've invited Dalton Durst from the UBports team. Welcome to the show, Dalton.
Thank you, Ryan. It's excellent to be here.
For those who don't know, Dalton is an open source software and infrastructure enthusiast. He helped to take over the Ubuntu Touch and Unity 8 project from Canonical. He's the development manager for UBports and self-described fanatic of documentation. So you're that guy that creates stuff I never read. At least that's what I get accused of.
Guilty as charged.
Awesome. Well, Dalton, we've been discussing the need on this show for many episodes, especially the last two, for a true Linux-based mobile OS. And we're so excited for you to be here and guest host with us so that we can get into some of the details of the work that you're doing. So before I get into what Michael and Noah's been up to this week, I want to get an update on Ubuntu Touch. So what are some of the things that the team's been working on?
So we've had a bit of a split effort for a little while here on Ubuntu Touch, where we have our normal release cadence, which is going to create Ubuntu Touch OTA 10.
Nice.
Where we've brought in some fixes from the community. Most of that release cadence has been created by the community exclusively rather than our core team of developers, for which we are incredibly thankful. That's updates to apps, a brand new redesign of the weather app, for example, camera improvements, so cameras aren't flipped over on some devices like this one anymore, and so many new things coming in Ubuntu Touch OTA 10 that it's kind of amazing.
So with getting Ubuntu Touch on a device today, because a lot of people are excited about this, but they've maybe tried some of these other OSs before, and you got to root your device and type in all these special commands and read a manual that's 900 pages long of how to get a different OS onto your phone. The Ubuntu Touch has done something quite a bit different, though. Can you explain how easy it is to get Ubuntu Touch onto your device if somebody wants to try it?
So early in our development of Ubuntu Touch, we realized something. It really stinks to have to root your phone, unlock the bootloader, use ADB, use fastboot, and all of that stuff yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do it all the time. It's just no fun. So what we created is the UBports installer. This is an Electron app that runs on Windows, Mac OS, and of course Linux.
Nice.
You plug your phone in developer mode, and it does everything for you. It says, this is the device that you'll be installing on, if it's a supported device. And you can pick which release channel you want to stay on. If you want to stay on stable, release candidate released weekly, or devil released nightly, you can pick any of those. And you can choose whether or not you want to wipe your device, because it's also useful for reinstalling if you ever need to.
Nice.
You just click go and let it do its work. Works best on Linux.
As it
and
should.
Of course, there's more improvements coming to other operating systems all the time. If you're on a distro with snaps, snap install UBports -installer will get you there.
Nice.
You know, I think the talent in being able to accomplish what you guys did, because I've installed it, Michael, you've installed it. It literally is that simple. I don't know of any other alternative OS, honestly, that has that. So then maybe they're out there, but I'm not aware of one that makes it that easy. This is, to me, speaks to the incredible talent of coders that you guys have, that you were able to develop something that is basically a one-click install on top of a phone that does all of that work behind the scenes. That's absolutely an incredible feat. And you do have to have a phone that's compatible with Ubuntu Touch, though. So before somebody goes and does that, go onto the ubports.com site and check which phones. Are there new ones coming in the future?
There are always new ones coming. We've got ports in progress, and a lot of work is going into compatibility with phones that shipped with Android 7.1. If you want to see the phones that are compatible with Ubuntu Touch right now, you can go to devices.ubuntu-touch.io, and you'll get the whole list right there for you, along with install instructions.
Perfect.
Nice. And I like the 1+1. I think that's one.
I also like the 1+1.
Yeah. That's what I would suggest if people want to get a new phone, because this phone is actually really powerful, even though it's fairly old. It's still quite powerful for its age, and it's also pretty cheap if you get it, because you got to get it used, but it's pretty cheap option too.
Oh yeah, it can be had for cheap. I personally like to buy on Swappa. Not sponsored by Swappa. That's where I've been buying all of my devices lately.
Nice.
And on top of that, you can, I know a lot of the questions that I'm getting recently on a video I did on UBports a while back on my channel is, can you connect it to a carrier still? So the answer is yes, you can connect it to US carriers for those in the US. I used Ting back in the day to get cell service, but I'm pretty sure it would be compatible as long as you have a SIM card with any of those devices you guys officially support to do so, right?
Right. So the devices that we have officially support are mostly GSM only. So like the OnePlus One is GSM only. It means it works on AT&T or T-Mobile.
Yeah.
Are the big networks that it works on. Verizon and Sprint are a little bit out of the picture. The Nexus 5 is supposed to work on Sprint. Verizon blacklisted all of them for some reason. But there are some issues there, and we haven't had enough people to test to actually find out what's going on with it. So if you're on AT&T, T-Mobile, or any of the MVNOs that sub-license those networks, you'll be good, Ting included.
Yeah, I've tested Ting, T-Mobile, and Metro, and they all worked totally fine.
So what are some of the exciting features or enhancements that will be coming to the Ubuntu Touch platform in the near future?
So the big thing that we've got going on is currently the Edge channel, as everyone has started calling it. This is a release channel where we mess with all the new stuff that isn't exactly ready for daily use, but is getting there really close. And what we're doing is we are merging in the newest work from Canonical that created the last version of Unity 8 before the project was dropped. So what you see on your device that you have there, Michael, is one of the older versions that was actually released by Canonical. That's with the scopes that come up automatically by default, your home screen. Whereas the new Edge channel has a desktop, actually.
Nice.
That is so
that
cool.
come back to.
Nice. Is
I
that
highly
similar?
recommend people watch the video version of Destination Linux this round if you don't normally, just so you can see what Dalton's holding up, because it's really cool to see the various phones.
And there's also all kinds of screenshots, and if you want a screenshot, you can just ask us for it, basically, or if you want to know what the differences are. But what the Edge channel brings to us is it brings us closer to that convergence buzzword goal. You gotta do that with the little shimmy, converge.
Right, convergence.
With the jazz hands, convergence.
Perfect. Because that means that the same code base is running between desktop and phone. And that's really been our goal since the beginning of the project, because that makes maintaining everything easier, and it makes the experience for both places consistent. Where on the phone, you drag out your drawer to get to all of your apps. On the desktop, you either hit the super key, click the button, or push your mouse against the side of the screen to get it to come out.
So Unity 8 right now, is that ready for desktop if I was to go install that, or not
It's
yet?
ready for testing on your desktop. However, for daily use, it's not exactly there yet. There are problems. It runs both in Ubuntu 16.04 and 18.04 we're building it for, and AMD 64 only for the desktop, no i3D6 packages. But we're still working out a lot of the things that are specific to desktop for Unity 8. And that work is continuing along with the phone now, since both of them are the same platform. We're finding fixes for one are also fixing the other in a lot of cases.
Very nice.
Nice.
So if we were to fast forward 5 years into the future, and what is your dream of what Ubuntu Touch is? Because I could sit here and tell you my whole dream, because I think where you guys are going, but I want to hear it from you. What is your dream 5 years from now? What does Ubuntu Touch look like?
So at its base, the reason why we continued Ubuntu Touch was because it is a user-respecting mobile operating system, right? Where both Android and iOS are user-hostile in a lot of ways, where they are building in more features so that your screen dims when it's time to get off, or you can set limits for yourself that you can also override easily, but we won't talk about that part. Ubuntu Touch is designed in a way that applications are paused whenever they're not in the foreground, so they can't get any of your data. It's
Nice.
very visible when data is being used, such as your location services. And the entire system is designed in a way we don't take a lot of data. And if we are collecting data, such as for that circle that appears on your home screen that says, you've sent this many messages today, that's all taken locally and not sent to a remote server.
Brilliant.
I mean, one of the things I love about the Ubuntu Touch is the way that it has the whole separation of all the security benefits of the apps, that that these apps are kind of like in their own container confinement structure, where you don't have to worry about whether this app is getting access to another app, where on Android or iOS, Android for sure, that is happening guaranteed.
Yeah.
And it's really nice, and I really like the fact that you can do like all the different structures of having different types of apps, like the web apps and the native apps, and even with like stuff like Anbox is really awesome.
And that that containerization, confinement, there's the word, was one of the base goals of the platform, helping users be more safe by ensuring their applications are safe, even if the applications are malicious.
Yeah.
And let's talk about that for a minute, because one of the things that people really want with their phone is the apps, right? And they can't get a hold of all. Obviously, you guys haven't gone and got every single bank app and credit card app and everybody to sign on yet. But you do have Anbox out there, which allows you to bring on, as I understand, Android apps into the platform itself. So if you have a specific app that you need, you should be able to bring that over from the Android store. But how do you guys keep that containerized? Does that have the same rules against it, so that if you're opening that banking app in the background, it doesn't keep sending data, or that Google app in the background? Or is that a situation where basically somebody's giving up some privacy because they're installing that Anbox?
So the big thing with Anbox is it's still very much in beta. And most of that hardware support you just mentioned isn't implemented yet.
Okay.
So the apps can't get access to your microphone. Surprise.
I love it.
The main thing with Anbox is ensuring that it does fit into that security model, and fixing up a lot of the bugs that it has, such as battery usage and general instability with it. That's one of those things that we released Anbox in the hope that a lot of people would see it and come on to help work on it, because it's a big feature that a lot of people have asked for.
Mm-hmm.
But with our team the size that it is, we are currently focusing on making our native apps and our native platform the best that it can possibly be. So Anbox in itself is not moving terribly fast, I'll give you that, but it is still there. It is meant to fit into the same confinement model of all the other apps.
Yeah, and also some of the apps I have worked flawlessly in Anbox. Like, there are some issues in other cases, but I've had a few apps that were just flawless, and it made it way easier to. Like, there was one of the things that made me not be able to completely switch when I was going for like doing some testing, and it was being able to use my To-Do app, which was only on Android, and because I use a syncing app that works on Android and the desktop. And with Anbox, it totally worked fine, and it made it a lot easier to use Ubuntu Touch. So it was great that was an option, but in most cases, I was able to use the native apps anyway. And I know this is completely irrelevant and not important at all, but the fact that I can use TweetDeck on the Ubuntu Touch phone is such a huge improvement over all the awful, absolute trash and Twitter apps on Android. Like, they're all just so annoying. And
Yep.
TweetDeck gives you everything you want in a nice, clean interface, and it's also mobile friendly because it uses the column system. And the fact that you can't do it on Android is so weird. But when I was like, okay, what's the Twitter options? TweetDeck's here. This is fantastic.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I assume that's a web app then?
It is a web app. Like, TweetDeck itself is a web app, but the fact that it works so smoothly inside of Ubuntu Touch, I was just happy to see it, because the fact that you can't do that on Android is so weird. And I was just like, because I was like, well, what options do I have? I was like, the best option, fantastic. So like, It's just, I know it's not important, but it's just something that I like. But so what kind of help do you need for the community as far as like, I know it'd be beneficial to have some people developing for like Andbox, like you said, but is there anything else that it would be beneficial?
So basically, if you know how to do it, we probably need help with it. Anything from
Right.
development, if you know C++, JavaScript, QML, if you know what any of those mean, or even if you don't, we have so many people who are willing to get in and help you. We have a boot camp room that we call it that.
Nice.
The motto is, there is no stupid question. We are here to help you develop Ubuntu Touch. Or if you like to design, if you think in terms of, well, what is that experience like? How consistent is this? We also love help with design and user experience work. Of course, we always need some web dev. So if you know Express.js or basically anything, we can probably find a place for you. Just whatever it is, I'm always thinking in this way because development manager also comes with a bit of community manager. I'm always thinking in terms of, well, you have skills, we got needs.
Let's put them together.
There's almost certainly something that we can help you do for us.
And where do people go if they want to help? They've heard the call. Where do you send? Where should they head to?
Well, they can head to anywhere in the community links on UBports.com, whether it be our forum or Telegram, or there's too many social media links for me to list.
Yeah.
You can contact me directly on Telegram if you're there at Universal Superbox. And I would be happy to talk to you.
Nice.
I know. That's always the reaction to the username.
I also want to mention out there, because none of the developers and open source community do mention this, so I mention it for them. And it's that you can donate financially as well to help support this project. You can donate to PayPal, Bitcoin, Liberapay, Patreon. You can become a Patreon of the community, but I'm sure that helps with funding. Obviously, in a lot of ways, you guys need this a lot because if you want a phone out there to have Ubuntu Touch support, if they don't have the phone and don't have the money to spend from the bank account to go buy the phone to figure out how to put it on there, then they're not going to be able to get it on there. So obviously buying hardware, hosting web servers, all of that requires funding. So if you have the ability to fund financially, go to ubports.com/donate and give some donation there. And do you guys accept hardware donations by chance?
It kind of depends. Most of them are just peer-to-peer kind of things because if you saw the thumbnail today, I have too many devices. It is a problem. Please.
Yeah, please send help. Yeah.
But we try to make it peer-to-peer, where someone who wants to port to something and someone who has something to port to can get together, kind of thing.
Okay.
So if someone can publicly offer, someone can publicly take, kind of thing.
Nice.
Gotcha. So they could go on the forums and say, hey, I have a couple of these devices I want to use, and maybe someone will match up with them if they're interested in porting it.
Right. And for our purposes, a lot of the times for the core team, we do have in mind what devices we're kind of looking at porting to. So it might not exactly be the one that you want, but it is the one generally that's best for Ubuntu Touch.
Awesome.
Such as ones with DisplayPort out over their Type-C port and things like that. So you can do external display support.
Well, thanks again for jumping on and helping us not only get up to date with the awesome work that you're doing, but while Zeb relaxes somewhere on a beach drinking some drink with an umbrella in it, you're going to co-host the rest of the show with us. So thank you for agreeing to do that.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So Noah, with that being said, how has your week been, my friend?
My data journey continues. So I undid all the work I did last week as far as upgrading the drives in the FreeNAS box, and we're actually going to 10 terabyte Western Digital Reds because after doing some math, those are the most cost-effective, reliable drives. Unbeknownst to me, and Ryan, you probably are aware of this because you're the kind of guy that is aware of these kinds of things, but the drive manufacturers actually publish statistics. Yeah. And they keep track of how many their drives fail, how many of them succeed. And what I found was Seagate has like a really bad track record in the last 6 years of having hard drives fails. And Western Digital Reds, if you have a Western Digital Red and you were to swap that drive out every 2 years, your chances of a drive failure are almost non-existent. And the only reported drive failures that have occurred in under 2 years were traced back to, if you dig into each one of those cases, you can trace them back to some sort of power supply failure that nuked all the drives, or somebody dropped something. Like it's not like the drives are running and then oops, all of a sudden they're not, and that's like a 2-year thing. At 4 years, you're actually pretty safe, and so I've just become obsessed with FreeNAS lately, and then the underlying technology ZFS obviously have become obsessed with that. And I know we were joking, or at least I thought we were joking the past few weeks about the whole ButterFS and ZFS thing, but now I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. And ZF, if you've never played with ZFS send and ZFS replication, being able to replicate your data sets over a network, well, you should go do that, because it's freaking powerful.
So I think it's really interesting. You mentioned about the hard drive failure rates. There are several companies out there as well that publish results independently, so you can check those out to see which drive's the best. The Seagates. One of the things I'm trying to get across is not to be brand loyal, but be innovation loyal. So the companies that are innovating the most, or in this case with a hard drive, you're looking for reliability, but never stick with that same message, because I've noticed throughout 20 years of recommending hardware to people that people will hold on to things that I've said 10 years ago and assume it's true. For instance, if I tell you 10 years ago that Asus makes the best motherboard, at that time that was true. But today that could change tomorrow.
That's still true.
Yeah, it kind of is.
Yeah, it's not going to change.
In an example is these companies do change. They do get different management. They do eventually sometimes can turn into crap companies where they weren't.
Seagate's a fantastic example of that, because they used to make good drives, and now they don't.
That's where I was going. And, companies, for instance, get that have turned around will tend to be held onto for a very long time from the community, and they deserve it in some cases, to where they've done the right thing, but people aren't taking notice because they hear people like me go out there and say, well, I remember Ryan 5 years ago said this one's the best. But you're absolutely correct. If you look at any of those numbers out there right now from third parties, Western Digital kind of is the king. There are others up there with them on reliability, but they have consistently kept that. But certainly I know at a certain point, if Western Digital changed, then we would come on and say, stop using them. Right now, Western Digital has held on to that title for at least the last 10 years, as I recall, of being one of the most reliable hard drives out there. And a lot of that has to do with the incredible testing that they do.
But aside from even like the actual hard drives, like the ability, like I don't know if you guys, if any of you have played with ZFS send and ZFS receive, but you can basically, when you go into FreeNAS and you go and create data sets, which is FreeNAS's way of organizing, well, data, I guess, is the best way to describe that. But when you create a data set, first of all, ZFS the FreeNAS actually keeps track of each of those individual data sets as they exist in a storage pool. But then the other thing is you can send them across the network. So I actually stood up a backup FreeNAS box that I was using to kind of organize files. I have like 20 some terabytes of data. So it's not a trivial task when I'm like, oh, I got to move this. It's like nobody makes a 20 terabyte drive. So it's not like I can just move my data over to an external hard drive while I, free up some space while I make some change. Like, no, this all has to exist on a NAS. So I had to stand up a backup NAS, and I was like, I'm going to have to rsync and blah, 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 and directories and attributes and archiving function to keep track of dates. And no, ZFS send. And it just sends that data set right over to the other box. You don't have to touch anything. You don't have to do anything. Just wait and it's done. And then that led into this whole thing of, hey, I need to be able to do this from anywhere, because like right now I'm in the middle of Wisconsin. How am I supposed to access my data? And so that involved setting up a whole nother infrastructure to be able to remotely access all of that data using, a combination of Open VPN and WireGuard and X2Go of all things. But yeah, it's been a journey. Like I'm really excited to kind of see where this takes not only my career, but where it takes us as far as Linux and talking about Linux and the cool things that are happening. Because when you dig into something like this, I envision this probably being about an 8-month process, ultimately resulting in probably a new FreeNAS with a 10 disk array, 128 gigabytes of memory, and a Z2 or a ZFS RAID Z2. So I've got a double parity.
That's beautiful,
Nice.
man. That sounds awesome. And the FreeNAS team has invited us, IX Systems, to tour their facility. So I think it's a perfect time while you're hyped that we go and take advantage of that. So we're going to have to set that up.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
So, Michael, what have you been up to this week?
Well, actually, this week has been a lot of things. So, first of all, for the video viewers, you might notice that the NAS is no longer in the background because it's actually set up now.
Oh, that's magic. It disappeared. It can't be set up, though, right?
It is set up. It's plugged
Whoa.
in. I set everything up. I started doing transition for the data. It's going to take a while to put all the data on there, but it is happening. So that's one of the things. I also, well, somewhat, kind of, not really, but sort of distro hopped recently too. And,
yes.
And that I'm using Endeavor OS, so Archbase, and I was actually kind of interesting because I wanted to try out the latest release from the ISO, and there were a few issues here and there, but overall I set it up, and I the only thing about being a distro hop user is setting up all the configs that. There's so many things that I want to change, especially because I use Plasma by the default. I don't like most of the stuff's in default, so I have to change a lot of things. So that part I'm not looking forward to. That's why I don't usually distro hop, but I do. I did switch to Endeavor, and it is running great. So I did that. I set up the NAS. I am actually setting up some new stuff for the back end for the OBS to streamline some stuff, and I'm actually going to be getting. This is not yet, but I am working on getting a monitor mount. So my 4 monitors are now going to be like 5 monitors, and set up like this big massive workstation for podcasting.
Apple has this new $999 monitor stand. You should totally check that out.
That's
yeah.
a good. That's a.
You should just get 4 of those.
Yeah, 4 of those.
Yeah, just 4 of
4.
those. Right.
Yeah.
That's a
Sure,
fantastic suggestion. I think I will look into that. Never.
Ryan could sell you some of his at a discount. He sold me a MacBook. Maybe he give you his monitor stands.
That's a good idea, Ryan. I'll get in touch with you afterwards so we can.
Absolutely. I try to make a profit on them, so I only sell them a little bit over the value of the $999 aluminum stand.
I mean, that makes sense. Markup percentage. That makes sense. I totally get it.
It's like $1,200.
But it may say now. Just so you know, it may say Vivo on it, and it may resemble a $200 stand from Amazon, but that's not. It's actually the Apple one. It's just Ryan decorates them a little bit. So just don't feel like you're getting ripped off. You're definitely not. It's totally an authentic Apple stand.
It's like, hey Ryan,
nobody else has.
Why is the paint flicking off? Like, why is this? Is
Well, to give you the cheese grater effect, I take a shotgun.
That's a feature, bro.
In the backyard
That's a feature.
to the Vivo stand. You know.
Oh, okay, cool. I appreciate that. That's
So, Dalton, what have you been up to this week?
I have been installing Ubuntu Matei everywhere.
Nice.
So I have been a happy Pop! OS and Solus Budgie user for a long time, but I got the hopper effect going. For some reason, my desktop was getting a little less stable, so I was like, it's probably hardware, but I'll hop anyway. So
Good decision.
I tried out Ubuntu Matei, and the first thing I do is go into the system monitor and see, oh my gosh, it's using less than 1 gigabyte of memory at boot.
Yep.
Yeah,
So you came from Pop! OS, you said, and how long were you on Pop! OS?
So Pop! OS was on the XPS, and I've been on that for, since I got the XPS. When did I get the XPS? A year and a half ago now? Yeah.
So you've been on it for a long time. Was that the one where you started having issues?
No, that was on my desktop, which is a custom-built AMD Ryzen 7 1700 and AMD RX 480 system.
Team Red,
nice.
Bring it. And so you've been on Pop! OS with that, and now you've switched to Matei. And how's the support for the AMD system in Matei?
I just booted it, and everything was fine.
That's what you
I did
want
have
to hear.
some screen tearing issues, so I switched from the default compositor to the GPU one, and now everything's good.
Perfect.
Nice.
One thing that I'm amazed with is just how fast everything feels.
Yeah. Well, that's the AMD part, but probably a little bit of Martin's coding too.
Same hardware. You click on a window and drag it, and it's like, why does this feel so bad in other desktops?
Yeah.
It just feels good. And I'm not new to the GNOME 2 designer ecosystem. That's when I started using Linux.
Right.
But coming back to it, it's like, oh wow, what have I been missing?
Yeah. I've been actually on the opposite side of you because I've moved a lot of my computers to Pop! OS because of the Ryzen 3rd Gen integration support that they built into it. And I found myself really impressed with Pop! OS lately and all the work that they've done. And certainly the fact that you stayed on them for that long speaks to that work, right?
Absolutely. It is a wonderful system. I might be hopping back to it on the XPS because I think I got better battery life on it. So whatever they're doing for their like Intel 8th and 9th gen enhancements, it's working real well.
Nice. And also, we didn't get a chance to get it into this week's news, but Pop! OS is building a firmware GUI tool, basically, I guess, that will be able to, we'll talk about it in next week's segment, but essentially it's taking all the work from the FWUPD, I think it's called. Yeah, and they're basically putting into a GUI in which anybody from any Ubuntu-based distro can benefit from, because they have a really neat firmware update system built into Pop! OS, but this will make it available to anybody who wants to use that as far as what I was reading. So that's something we'll cover in the next episode.
Very nice. So in the community feedback this week, Wayne writes to us and says, hi folks, it was really interesting for me to listen to you all talk about the Android versus iOS and all the good, the bad, and the ugly sides of each of the OSs. In the company, so where even the good is questionable or non-existent in some cases. I find it very hard to take that we Linux users, with all our knowledge of what is going on in the background, continue to be iOS and Android users. I'm not sure how we can sit back and say that this is bad and that is bad and make no effort to make the change. So we have to be the ones to make the change and be seen to be the adopting to the standpoint that we promote. Does this come without sacrifice? No, of course there is some sacrifice. Surely we need to be seen to be the ones to make that sacrifice, though. I myself ran Ubuntu Touch for a few months, and now I use Lineage on with F-Droid. Though to have an experimental, I have experimented with E, that's /E/. That's still a terrible name. I have spent approximately 18 months moving away from my Google services and have been running Android alternative mobile OSs for approximately 4 years. The only service where they have me over a barrel is with YouTube, because I like to watch technical videos, and that's true for basically everybody. YouTube has become like so dominant, it's ridiculous. And he said, I cannot seem to find a suitable alternative to that service. But that said, I'm always happy to hear your thoughts and comments, and thanks for the show. Best wishes, Wayne.
I love this email. We've been trying to talk about for a while here about, the Android and iOS setup is a disaster from a privacy standpoint. They're both a disaster, although one is far more disastrous than the other, I think, from a privacy standpoint, security standpoint. And I see most of the Linux community out there, even out in the wild at conferences and things, running stock Android. I think there is sacrifices with any of these platforms that people are going to have to make. But if you look at the recent news, every single week, there is massive amounts of breaches occurring. Mm-hmm. And so the idea now that you're going to slip by and not become a part of one of these breaches, from the Google App Store just took down, I think, another 86 apps. And these are no longer, it used to be that a lot of these apps were kind of
weird, random,
silly, stupid, random apps. Now they're ones that have millions of people have downloaded them, and they do major functions on your phone. They are camera apps. They are note-taking apps. They're huge, and they basically infect your phone right from the beginning with malware and things. So, and we keep more private things on our phone, as we've talked about. I think the majority of people keep more private things on their phone than they even do their desktop computer. So I agree. Linux users, I feel, should not be accepting the options that we have out there in the market. And there are people like Dalton right here who are doing things to change that with Ubuntu Touch. And when you go to those platforms, though, it is important to say you are going to have a sacrifice. There may be, you're not going to get the latest Pokemon Go app to work on your phone. You may
Unacceptable, sir.
You may have to go to a website and browse to your bank versus going through the mobile browser to get to your bank versus using an app. But I think at the end of the day, these are worthwhile sacrifices that most people could probably deal with. Now, Bo, who goes to my Linux and Coffee event here in Georgia, who does penetration testing, he carries around a flip phone. instead of having any smartphone. So think about that sacrifice. Whereas you could, and what I'm been telling them is you could go with something like the Ubuntu Touch phone. You could still have the smartphone, but still have that security. So you'd have the ability to open a browser and not have to hit 6 3 times to get to an E if you're texting somebody. You would have some advantages over using, but there are that to me is the extreme sacrifice, right? That you would go to just a phone that has none of these smart features. The in the middle of the ground sacrifice is to just go with one of these alternatives here. And Dalton, which alternative might you recommend?
Oh, I don't know. I think I might be a little biased on that one.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Nice.
Of course, I'd recommend Ubuntu Touch. It's exactly what you need.
Exactly. Now, Michael, you kind of mentioned when the YouTube part, and he asked for alternatives. There are alternatives out there like PeerTube. I've used. I get like a whole 6 views on any video I put on PeerTube. So there isn't a really good alternative out there. I feel like to really. YouTube, there are a bunch that are trying, but honestly, I can't say any of them really attract an audience, number one, for creators, or number two, that there's an audience even watching this stuff out there.
There are alternatives that are good. Like PeerTube is a great alternative, but PeerTube has an issue where, like, when it comes to federation and decentralizing, the idea is really good, but there are many issues with that concept. And when it comes to social media of any kind, it's a very complicated issue, and it's very difficult to do decentralized structures. Because, for example, the reason why PeerTube has a problem is because there's no company that's backing PeerTube, in the sense of like a big company. The reason why people go to YouTube and they post on YouTube is because it's free to do so. They're not requiring you to pay. They don't have a limit of how many gigs you can upload and that kind of thing. Whereas PeerTube, they're all scattered, and there's quite a few of them, but they all have limits. 5 gigs here, 10 gigs there, but you're still limited of how many you can do, and also you're limited of how likely people are going to find you, because you are on this one instance. Maybe that instance is a part of the federation, maybe it's not. There's really not really easy way to know in the case of PeerTube. So it just creates this thing that people just don't bother. There are other alternatives, like BitChute is another one, and DTube, and they're very similar in the sense of like they're more of a torrent style. Those are options. Daily Motion even is an option, but basically there's not really.
Yeah, I mean, to do a comparison, so the Arch Linux video that I did recently, PeerTube 6 views, YouTube 8.8 thousand. So when you think about like, are creators going to go to a platform and start throwing content out there when you get nobody looking at it? So I mean, part of it is us as a community have to look for content on alternate platforms, I guess. And number two is, though, to your point, Michael, I'm not sure the alternatives that we have really found the right infrastructure to promote that.
Right. It's weird because you're going to have to promote people to use PeerTube while on YouTube. And then that's just going to be like, are they going to switch? More than likely not, because they're already on YouTube, but they already got the content, so it's not really worth the effort. So like, there's an issue there because YouTube is so dominant to a level of ridiculous that it's hard to have another alternative to it, unless a company that can compete with YouTube and Google could come out like that. So if Amazon decided to make Twitch into a YouTube competitor, at that point, maybe it'd be interesting to see there be an alternative. Which they're kind
of doing, but specializing in a slow roll, which is smart, because they couldn't come out and initially, I think Twitch is a competitor. Mixer is also one from Microsoft that is gaming based, but they're also adding in the entertainment. They're adding in the arts and things like that people can do videos on. But those even those platforms with massive amount of money backing them are doing slow rolls where they're basically focusing on niche markets first and then slowly expanding that into opening up other categories for people to post videos on. Because if you just went for YouTube directly, it's just probably not going to work.
Yeah, they're even doing just streaming first, and then they're rolling out like with Twitch, it was originally just streaming. And then they started making it possible to do clips, and they started making it possible to do like archived episodes. Now they make it possible to upload videos, but they still don't promote that part. They just talk about the streaming. So YouTube is basically so dominant that there's really not an option, and it's going to be a massive undertaking to become an alternative to that. But as far as like you could say kind of the same thing about Android and iOS, but at the same time, but there are things that it's easier in that sense because it's an individual person using it for their needs, right? Not trying to like interconnect and do discovery and all this other stuff.
If I may, I think that we're looking at this almost the wrong way, where our PeerTube and DTube and BitChute, are they all meant to replace YouTube? Because where I see them fitting in more is replacing Vimeo, where you are paying for someone else to host your videos in a way that is best for your users rather than best for the hosting platform in that way.
I mean, that would be great, but
you're paying Vimeo so that you don't get ads on your videos, so that you get the nice player, you get all of these things, and you aren't hosting it on your own infrastructure.
I mean, that's true. I think that's an interesting perspective. I think that's worth talking about, but I don't think I've seen any of these services have a premium option. They usually just have, here's a limit, and that's it.
That's where I see them fitting more, though, even if no one has found that yet.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think somebody who's using PeerTube should look into that becoming because Vimeo doesn't really offer that much in comparison that you can't do with PeerTube. Right. So I think that's a fantastic suggestion, because if any of these PeerTube instances wanted to do that, I think there'd be a lot of potential there. So hopefully that some people will listen to the show and do that.
Yeah, and see, that's kind of where I go with the Android killer or iOS killer thing too, where it's like it doesn't need to be. With Ubuntu Touch, it doesn't need to be an Android killer. There is no way with the team size that we have we're going to do things like augmented reality and virtual reality, and you can pay anywhere with your phone. Those kinds of things that require the multi-billion-dollar contracts, R&D, might not be possible for the small communities. Yeah. But it's okay, because what we can do really well, and we can plow into that niche area.
Yeah, and you can create interfaces for their tools like Anbox that allows you kind of to take advantage of the same stuff without having to write it. So that's kind of cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this is actually kind of bring up to the thing we want to talk about what we want to try something different for the feedback, because we've been doing the email thing, and we still want you to send the emails in, of course, but we want to try something different this week. So if you're interested, please send us a video comment showing us your tech, your favorite desktop, your comments or suggestions are related to this episode or any episode in general, and we may feature it on a future episode. So you can post it on YouTube, you can post it on PeerTube, you could put or wherever you want, and you don't have to make it public. You can unlist them if you want to, and just send us the link to that, and then we can take that video and put it inside of a future episode, and then have like a direct interaction between. It's kind of like how a long time ago, if you've ever used YouTube like 10 years ago, there was this feature that they destroyed, and people loved it and really hate the fact that they did this, but it was called video replies. So you could reply to someone else's video and with your own video, and it would kind of interlinked in that sense. And YouTube decided to kill that. So this is kind of like bringing that back directly inside of an episode. And I think that has a lot of potential, and I hope that people would be willing to participate in that. But it doesn't have to be a video. So if you want to do, like, you can do a still picture of yourself or whatever you want. It could even be like just your desktop and you talking over it. Just something that, we just want to try out something different. And also to get the ball rolling for this new segment, where the first 10 videos that makes it onto the show, we will send some free DL stickers and swag to you. So if you would like to, you can just include your address.
Don't mind me just taking a video of how I use Linux.
Perfect. So you can, if you want some swag, you can just include your address in your email when you send it to us with a video link, and you can send those video links and information to comments@destinationlinux.org.
This episode of Destination Linux is sponsored by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean offers the simplest, most developer-friendly cloud platform. It's optimized to make managing and scaling apps easy with an intuitive API, multiple storage options, integrated firewalls, load balancers, and more. You can get all this plus access to the world-class customer support for as low as $5 per month, or you can use their flexible pricing structure for as low as 0.7 cents per hour. That's darn near free. DigitalOcean also has 2,000 cloud-agnostic tutorials to help you stay up to date with the latest open source software, languages, and frameworks. Get started on DigitalOcean for 1 month free with a $50 credit by going to do.co/DL. It's really important you use that link do.co/DL so you can let them know that Destination Linux is where you're coming from. Again, get started on DigitalOcean with $50 credit, do.co/DL. And we want to thank DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode of Destination Linux.
Not only do they have the best cloud hosting, they also have the best stickers.
That's true. We need to get some of them stickers, put in our swag pack. So with us today, we have a very special guest. We have Simon Steinbeiß with us, and he is coming from the XFCE 4.14 team. And we reached out to Sean Davis and asked if he would come on the show. And he said, you know what? You need to talk to Simon because he was a huge part of the XFCE 4.14 release. So Simon, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
So Simon is a part of the Ubuntu Council. He is a Ubuntu developer, a part of the XFCE 4 panel team. You contributed heavily to the release of XFCE 4.14, as we mentioned. And despite that, according to your Ubuntu profile, it states that all this computery stuff is just a hobby to you. So it seems like with all of those roles, this has got to be a little more than a hobby, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I back when I wrote this part of my profile, I was still working at university because my main fields were philosophy and comparative religious studies. So that was also what I was teaching. So I was doing research, mostly sociological research at university. I was also teaching courses. And actually 3 or 4 years ago, I made computery stuff also my day job. So I guess that part is now a little inaccurate. But yeah, still XFCE is my hobby. So yeah, I do that in my free time.
Well, we're really glad it became more than a hobby for here because XFCE has been, and from the very beginning of the show, my favorite desktop environment of all time. So I love all the work that you guys do there. So we're just going to ask you a few questions about this release. Obviously, it was 4 years and 5 months of work that went into XFCE 4.14. All of us are very excited to get in here and look at all the work that you've delivered. I've been in it all week and enjoying it on Arch. But Michael, you have the first question here.
So what are the differences for people to notice right away with the 4.14 from like the previous versions?
Sure. So I guess that's an interesting question because ideally people would not notice the transition from GTK2 to GTK3 because that was sort of that was just a toolkit change. And ideally, if you use a theme like Graybird, the one that I maintain, then you shouldn't really see many differences because Graybird looks the same in GTK2 and GTK3. Obviously, we added some features, and those you surely will notice. One of the obvious things is the new dialog for managing color profiles. So if you that was actually one thing that I really wanted to contribute in this cycle because we didn't have any color D integration so far. And now we at least have a front-end integration. So people can easily load existing profiles. They can use GCM Viewer to see the details, or they can also use GCM Calibrate to actually calibrate their screens with some extra hardware. And yeah, that's definitely one of the big features, one of the obvious features. Another one that I would mention is the support for primary displays or primary monitor.
Nice.
This is also something that people have wanted for a long time, and I really worked hard actually on multiple components to get that working everywhere. So I wrote the patch for the panel, obviously, for the desktop, and also for the notifications to be able to give people a way of getting all of this onto one screen very quickly. And as you'll see very soon on our tour, on our 4.14 tour, which hasn't been released because we're really super busy in getting out all the releases on time. The tour will be out, I think, tomorrow or the day after, maybe. You'll see a screenshot where you can see an overlay where you easily see in the display dialog which things are currently being displayed on your primary display. And it also gives you an option to quickly configure, for instance, notifications being on the primary desktop, which is helpful for multi-display setups.
Very nice.
Very nice.
One of the things I would say you noticed right away, and at least I noticed right away with XFCE 4.14, was the wallpaper. right? That beautiful blue, it's very blue, but it's gorgeous wallpaper with the whisker mouse, of course, front and center on it. So that is one thing. Is that a community? Was that a community contributed wallpaper?
Well, to some extent, so I've been also contributing to Xfce in terms of wallpapers a few releases back, but the last one and this one were both done by Pasi, who is also on the Ubuntu team. So we've had him as an artwork lead for many years, and he also occasionally contributed to Xfce in terms of artwork, but mostly in terms of website. So to some extent, it's a core team job, and yeah, I'm happy you like it. That was also one of the things we wanted to get done last minute. It's not the first thing when you do a new release. You think, oh, I need to do fancy wallpaper. That's the thing that we had on our priorities list at the very bottom. And that was one of the things that I'm really happy that it turned out so nicely, even though it was last.
Well, it's funny because it makes complete sense that would be at the bottom priority list. But I'll tell you, there are a lot of desktop environments that you go into, and the wallpaper is so bad that it honestly gives you a bad feeling about using it the rest of the time, and it kind of just turns you off a little bit. And I think it is one of those important things, and you guys nailed it. I think with the blue, it's not. Obviously, if it was green, it would be better because DOS Geek green. But the blue, I'm accepting right now. Correct. It's gorgeous. Well done.
Yeah. Thanks.
What are some of your favorite features in this release?
So I would go with the multi-display support. There was also something that took me a very long time to write. And in fact, in 2011, I wrote a bug report for that. So I wrote a bug report in 2011 about being able to save display profiles and of being able to, have a complete setup of 3 displays, and you just connect your laptop to it, and it remembers, ooh, yeah, that goes here, that goes there, that goes there. Or even if you want to just rotate the screen and you want to quickly switch to that profile, that there should be an easy way to do so. And after writing the bug report in 2011, I think I wrote basically the specification of how it should be implemented in 2012. Keep of the Xfce wiki, and then finally this cycle I thought, it's actually not supposed to be a featureful cycle, because we mostly wanted to get the GTK3 transition done, but I just wanted to get it done. I use my laptop at work with multiple docking stations, with multiple different displays. I walk around a lot, so I click into a new docking station. I hate setting up everything from scratch every time, and I hate having bash scripts or UDEF rules to do that for me. So. And I also wanted to give people, actually one of the feedbacks or one of the comments on this new feature was, yeah, but you can do the same thing with an XR&R bash script. And that's true, you can do everything with bash scripts, I guess. But in this case, it was particularly important to me that it's a user-friendly way and that it's accessible to people, because I think that it's a feature that is becoming more important, because we're not really sitting statically in the same setup all the time in front of one desktop that is our one sole computer.
A lot of people are doing laptops as their main computer now and just using the external displays when they do on a workstation. Like when they can go into, I know some people who have, like, I was talking to in my local user group. There was a new guy who showed up the last time, and he showed a photo of his setup. And he had like a monstrous 6 monitors display thing, and then I was like, "What's powering this?" And it's just a laptop that he has connected to a dock, and everything, and all the monitors are connected that way. And it was because he said he preferred to just transition.
Not to derail conversation, but do you happen to know which dock he was using to drive 6 displays? Because I'd be extremely interested.
Well, he told me. I don't remember. I did ask. I just don't remember.
Probably one of those.
But we can find out is what it was.
Yeah, I'll ask it.
What was that, Dalton?
It's probably one of those GPU docks. So it's he's just connecting to a big GPU, and then the GPU has 6 display outputs.
Right.
Because even my RX 480 has 5, so that's close.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about, Dalton, is the external boxes that can hold a GPU inside of them. He's connecting to one of those, and then all of the displays are connected to that. That could make sense.
He said the laptop was what wasn't powering the thing. It was like whatever dock GPU thing he was doing, and he just used the laptop when he, with travels. He's using the same laptop and has his all same setup. But once he connects to the dock, he wants to have everything set up that particular way. So it's very important to have that functionality. And while technically a bash script would do it, that's not a solution. Like that's never a solution to say, hey, just do it with a bash script. It's like unless that's for someone who's like, you know, a technical person and you're talking to that person, that I guess that could be a solution, is like, here's a bash script. But if it requires someone to build a bash script out in order to do this, you know, something that should automatically be available, that's not a solution. And that's
and the other part is, obviously, even if you have a bash script, how is your bash script going to remember the 6 monitors and then the 2 monitors that you have in your alternate setup?
Yeah, exactly.
And so on and so on and so on. So
you should have a thumb drive with multiple bash scripts or something.
Oh yeah, that sounds
right.
That's so convenient.
Why did I think of that? You know, yeah, but I guess that's probably my favorite feature.
Nice.
So you've talked about the things that you did get into the release that you really wanted, but were there any enhancements that the team wanted to get into the release but just ran out of time? They have to be pushed to 4.15?
That's always a tricky question, because obviously there are always things that fall off the cliff, but it's very hard to nail it down to one specific enhancement that we had to drop. I think that the next cycle will be a much shorter one, where we focus on these enhancements and on making things a little more consistent. That's maybe one of the things that is important to me, that all the dialogues look very consistent. That was always the case in the past with Xfce. And I think with this release, as we didn't do just a one-to-one port, and some of the GTK widgets really changed also in terms of features, I think that we need to rethink that a little bit. There's things like inline toolbars that we're sometimes using, sometimes not using, etc. This is very, very UX-y stuff, but I would have liked to have more time to polish that. And I think that 4.16 will be to some extent about that.
Very nice. So how has the feedback been for you so far from the community? Obviously, I'm a member of the Xfce community, and my feedback to you is amazing job. But how's some of the other feedback been from other members of the community?
Yeah, so far the feedback has been overly positive. So the good thing is that 4.13 had already been out in the wild in some distributions, which was also obviously something pressuring us to do the stable release. But there were still actually components that had been basically unshipped in any distribution. So our window manager and the session manager, which are two really crucial parts of the desktop, had not really been shipped in any major distribution. So while you could find most of what is 4.14 today in, for instance, Ubuntu, or to some extent, I guess, also Fedora in the past cycles, you could never find the session manager. And when I started to work on getting 4.14 out, I obviously took a look at the session manager and then started to realize when nobody wanted to ship it. So there was a lot of work that had to go into that. And I'm happy that it's stable so far, because people don't complain about it. And that was the most important achievement for just the session manager. It's something that you just want to work, you know. Actually, I did put in 1 or 2 extra features in terms of making session saving simpler, or knowing when you've saved the session, because that was also an issue for people in the past. But I would say the feedback has been very positive. Things have been very stable, luckily, so no big mess ups, I would say. There will be obviously patch releases in the coming weeks and months for the components, because as they run out into more distributions, we will get more bug reports, but I'm confident that this was a very stable release all in all.
Nice. That's an interesting perspective also when you said that, you know, the feedback is positive, but also not getting some types of feedback is like what you're hoping for. So that's pretty funny. So I'm curious, what are one of the features that's probably it's getting a lot of more attention lately in the past couple of years is the high DPI support for various DEs. Mm-hmm. And those of us who have high DPI monitors, we're very thankful that this is becoming a thing. What were some of the difficulties in getting this to work in Xfce?
So let me jump ahead a little bit there, because high DPI is sort of an ambiguous term, and fractional scaling is something that not everybody is familiar with. But I guess when they say high DPI, oftentimes they mean fractional scaling. So really having everything at the same or at the correct size, no matter what the size of your physical display, and so sort of taking everything into account, everything should always be at the correct size, to put it in a very simple way. So the main point of getting something like fractional scaling to work is having Wayland. Simply because X doesn't really support fractional scaling. There are some sort of loopholes, which is also why we introduced R&R display scaling as a hidden option for those who know what they're doing and who also are sort of willing to take the performance hit, because R&R display scaling does have a huge performance hit. Apart from this, sort of the only thing you can do with GTK native measures and with X11 is either it's once the size or it's twice the size. That helps for some people who have high DPI setups, but obviously it doesn't help everybody. The other thing that you can actually do is tweak the DPI settings yourself in the appearance dialog. That was also possible in the past. But the thing that people will really want to see is fractional scaling support, proper fractional scaling support. And this is something that has only landed in GNOME Shell, like not ages ago, but sort of when switching to Wayland, that was one of the first things that they wanted to do, have fractional scaling support. For us, GTK3 transition is the first step towards being able to run things on Wayland. Many things will have to be rewritten for Wayland, so we'll see how soon we will actually approach that as a very concrete goal. I would say at least the groundwork for that has been laid.
I mean, like a follow-up question to that is very important. I think everybody is going to ask this at some point.
Yeah.
Will it become WFCE?
Nice, Michael. Nice dad joke to throw in there.
You're welcome.
Nice.
You're welcome.
I think the question I have is, so we've seen fractional, I noticed in the release notes you guys mentioned high DPI support. So you also just talked about the fact that there is the fractional scaling a lot of people look for. So when you say you've added in high DPI support, is that just because of the transition to GTK3, you have those possibilities, those options available there, and the next step is really to add in that scaling? Is that what that means? Yeah. Okay.
So in theory, we could have added the support for just setting this option of sort of doubling the size of every widget, even in 4.12, but it wouldn't have made any sense because all Xfce components were GTK2 at the time, so they wouldn't have scaled up to twice the size. Now that they are, we felt it's meaningful to add that option to the appearance panel. And yeah, people can switch now, and all of Xfce will be sort of double the size and everything that's GTK3. If you're still using GIMP in a GTK2 version, yeah, you're out of luck. That won't magically upscale.
Right.
That's something people have to keep in mind anyway. But when I say we have had some achievements in high DPI land with 4.14, I would say everything's GTK3, so we can use the high DPI features of GTK3 for Xfce.
Nice.
When it comes to desktop environments, there's no such thing as a feature complete desktop environment, right? It's always an evolving nature. You're always responding not only just to the market, but to the needs and growth of users. And as other technology becomes available, obviously, we begin to incorporate those kinds of things. What is next for Xfce? If there's somebody out there and they're listening to this episode and they're going, man, it really sounds like they've thought of everything. It really sounds like they've done everything. What can they expect next?
Yeah, that's also a very difficult one because you could go in multiple directions with that. I will maybe stick to some example that I've already mentioned at the beginning of this show, which is the color dialog. So I've mentioned that there is we have front-end integration for ColorD now. And what I would expect to see in either 4.16 or 4.18 is the backend integrations. It will be a lot of work, but that's something that I really want to do. So that's one random example. It's very tricky to say. We don't have any concrete plans. We're really happy that 4.14 is out now. And it's only been sort of a few days for us, and we still haven't published the tour. So in that sense, you're probably going to give us a little more time to come up with a concrete roadmap. But I would say the things that I also mentioned before is the UX tweaks, making sure everything looks consistent everywhere, making sure you have keyboard accelerators everywhere, all those small things that you simply need as a user, all those things. And some of them were actually also lost originally in the GTK3 transition. We want to bring those back and have a very, very consistent and good user experience.
I mean, one of the things that I've always appreciated about Xfce, and I hear this, and Noah, you've been playing with Xfce, and even this was your conclusion you came up with on your own, is the consistency. It's always going to work. You're going to get into it, and the settings and things that you expect are where they're always were in a way. At least in my 4 years of being in Linux, they always, if you want to change the clock from 24 to 12, you right click on the clock, it's right there, you change it. Everything is very consistent, it's reliable. You know what you're going to get when you install an Xfce desktop environment. So for me, the release cycles or taking the time to work out the bugs and creating that consistency in between cycles is one of the advantages of Xfce. It's one of the things I love about Xfce.
Yeah, I guess actually many people in the developer community feel the same way. Like, we don't have the feeling that we need to sort of radically change a lot of things around Xfce, but
Yep.
it's really just, making sure that everything is really, really consistent. And yeah, I guess, there's always things you can improve. So I'm sure we can improve a lot of things for 4.16.
Yeah, there's polishing things that I would like to see that just makes things more user friendly kind of thing. But like when you're already working on that with like the display stuff, and the primary display was one of the things that I preferred, and I like the fact that the latest version has a release where like when you open a new application, it opens wherever your mouse is located. And so like if whatever monitor you're on is the one it activates for, and that is something I was wanting for a while. So it's really great to see that came. And there's I think there's a lot of great stuff that Xfce does in the sense of being just the consistency thing is really important, because when you load up Xfce, you know that the things that you set are gonna be that's where everything's gonna be. Whereas other DEs frequently will change things randomly for no apparent reason, and that's not a good idea. So I'm very much a fan of the fact that Xfce is like when you change something, it's a gradual change that doesn't like jump in your face. It's like, oh, hey, where is the thing I was looking for? Well, it's some random place here now. So like I really think that Xfce is one of the big solid points for it, is that it is very consistent and reliable.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, as I said before, I think that's a mentality thing that people in the developer community share. Like, we very rarely have people that are really part of the community that come up with crazy ideas and say, let's sort of reorder everything. And
Right.
Usually people are very happy with the consistency, and also that's an advantage of being slow in terms of changing. That you have this consistency to some extent automatically. But I also think and agree, I think I'm not sure who of you said that exactly, but that you find things in very intuitive places. That's something that I also want to continue working on.
You talked about how you probably can't answer this question, I know that, but because it's so recent. But earlier you mentioned how you were trying to focus on getting a shorter release cycle for the next release. Do you know like how much, like how long you think that this particular next release will be structured at? Is there anything that you could say about whether, like, how short do you mean in comparison?
Actually, and that's something that maybe not everybody who's using Xfce really knows, is that we do have an official release model, and that official release model says that we release every year. And I would like to try to stick to that release model again to some extent, just cut down the blueprints to something that is manageable. The problem with why 4.12 and 4.14 took so long was actually, manifold, or there were actually really many factors in play. One of them was a few of our co-developers left for private reasons, just real life that happens sometimes. And so we had big holes to fill and big shoes to fill in terms of picking up development again. Luckily now in a much better place, but there was, and also that's the other point, saying now we have a feature-less cycle and we just port things from GTK2 to GTK3 doesn't really attract many new developers.
That's true.
So that didn't really help. I'm happy that this is done now, that we can focus on, maybe cleaning up further deprecations, but other than this, push in some tweaks here and there and attract more people and make it a shorter release cycle to show that we're alive.
Nice.
All right, so Simon, I hear everything you're saying, and I want Xfce 4.14 now. How do I get it?
There are some rolling release distributions, and I guess Arch Linux is a good go-to place for that. Other than this, you can wait for the next Ubuntu release, which is due in October, so that's not too long away. or not too far away, the next Fedora release will have it. And if you want to just try it, play with it, we do have an official Docker container that is called Xfce test that we also use for testing Xfce, and we're actually working on this to make it even easier to use. And also to add some official documentation to it. But you can simply download a fully featured Docker container from Docker Hub that is called Xfce test with 4.14 inside. Bring it up, you get basically a Sapphire screen inside of your running desktop. You can play around with the components. You can look if the translations are fine if you're a translator. So this is something that we've also been working on during this cycle to make it more accessible in terms of testing and make it easier. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, I like that. So every desktop environment and project could use some help from the community. Where are some areas that Xfce needs the most help right now?
I would say we surely need more coders or more people who can write good C code and who also sort of like the Xfce mentality of keeping things in a sane place, or feeling that some things are already in a sane place and we don't need to change them for the sake of change. So developers is certainly one thing that we need. Artists, I would also say. I started as a UX designer when I joined Xfce. And I haven't been able to do much of that lately because I've been writing so much code. So I would definitely say that would help. We luckily have a lot of translators, but we don't have that many testers. And that would also be something really worthwhile, to have a really stable testing community that says, okay, there's a new development release out, we take it for a spin, we know what we're doing, we're writing automated GUI tests. It's also something that the Docker container facilitates via Python behave framework. So yeah, those are the things that I think we need most. Also,
Nice.
in terms of priority, probably developers and then testing UX. I don't know. It's difficult.
Sure. Well, hopefully we can send some your way as they hear this interview. We really want to thank you and the entire Xfce development community for all the incredible work and dedication that you guys do for Xfce. I think it looks absolutely incredible. I've been using it all week. It made me instantly feel at home. Sometimes I'll go because, being part of this podcast, you got to check out everything, and I'll leave Xfce for a while. But it was the first desktop environment I fell in love with 4 years ago. It's still the desktop environment that's my favorite today. You guys should be really proud of all the work that you're doing, and I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with next. Thanks for coming on the show, Simon.
Thanks for having me.
So this week, KDE released their big set of big releases for all their applications of 19.08. And the goal of this release was to bring more features and better designed software that increases the usability and stability of various apps like Dolphin, Console, Kate, Ocular, GwenView, and many others. So some of the standout features include Dolphin. Dolphin has improvements to their to minimize clutter and improve the information panel section. This is really good because the information panel has it seems like it doesn't have a lot of content, and this latest release is actually making it much more information, so you get a lot more about your various different files for images and stuff. It also allows you to play media, for example, right from the main panel.
I love that.
Yeah, that's really cool. The GwenView image viewer improves the thumbnail viewing, which is really nice because it has like a small thumbnail, low resource approach, so that it loads these thumbnails much faster, which is very cool. And it also adds a new share menu. Ocular received improvements for EPUB support, so you can do ebook reading inside of Ocular. And it will also no longer crash with malformed EPUB files. And it has improvements to the high DPI support. Console gets a boost in tiling features, which is really nice because Console already had the ability to do tiling of different terminals, but it
not well.
No. But the latest version is really nice, especially the way of reorganizing things. Because it used to be you'd have to prepare how you want the tiling before you do it. And now you just set up the tiling. Okay, I want to move this one tiling. So you just drag and drop, move it wherever you want. And it shows you like a preview of where it will go. And that is fantastic. Also, Kdenlive gets some new keyboard and mouse combination shortcuts that increase the productivity. So you can do change the speed of a clip. The 3-point editing operations are now more consistent with other video editors, which is really, really nice. So people who are transitioning from one editor to the other to Kdenlive will have that that transition much better. So overall, there's like a lot of different stuff in this release with all these different types of applications. Because basically, what happens is when KDE apps release a thing, they basically all have a main goal of like, we're going to release on this day, and everybody's involved. And most of the time, everybody is involved in the various different applications. And this is great because there's a lot of bug fixes and user improvements overall. And there's actually quite a few like this particular release. They are now up to like 35 different flat hubs or flat packs and stuff, and they also have support for snaps and app images and everything. So this is, if you are a KDE user or you like some of their applications, definitely check out the latest releases for whatever application that might be.
So I made a mistake once, and there is a package that is out there that allows you to get all of the KDE applications in one install package.
Little meta package.
I thought that was exciting, and I installed it, and then my menu blew up with 1,900 billion applications. That KDE
might be a
writes.
slight exaggeration.
Okay, 1,100 billion. No, I'm pretty sure that's it.
No, 1,100 million. You put it.
Okay,
it's just,
million.
Slight
factors there.
It's a couple factors issue, but
I bring that up only to say it's amazing how much that team has created, how many applications and things out there. It's also amazing their use of K with almost all of them, and I wish they would stop. But outside of that,
they have sort of stopped, and like new applications don't do that much. Like there's a new disk usage thing called FileLight. There's no K in that whatsoever.
Thank you.
Yep.
Maybe they've heard the feedback.
But yeah, there's quite a few applications that KDE makes that are actually fantastic. There's a lot of fantastic tools that KDE makes, and it's definitely worth checking out. And also, they updated their application website. So not only are you able to look at, like, they gave some categorizations, and they've reorganized the sorting and the searching, and they've improved that, but they've also added add-ons. So not only just the applications that KDE makes, the things and plugins and stuff that KDE makes, like Latte Dock is technically not an app, but it is a very awesome feature. It's now available on their website as to find a different add-ons and stuff like that. So it's definitely worth checking out the latest updates for the KDE applications.
Fanboy, you're done. No
and
more talking.
The KDE applications for the add-ons and stuff. So you should go check those out. And I agree. Let's move on.
If you're looking for a fully open source tablet, including not only the software but the hardware, you got to check out the new CutiePi. This tablet features a foldable handle that doubles as its stand, and an 8-inch 1280 by 800 IPS LCD panel, a 4,800 milliamp hour battery.
That would be amazing.
Really big battery.
A car battery attached to your tablet.
It's a 4.8 amp hour battery.
Yeah.
A USB-A port, a micro SD card reader, and 6 GPIO pins. The tablet's expected to release sometime around the end of 2019, so hopefully it'll be just in time for Christmas for that Raspberry Pi fanboy in your family. They're using the Raspberry Pi 3 compute module, which is in a DDR3 form factor, which helps improve the weight of the device and keep the entire thing slimmer. And the video of the developer edition that they have up, we'll have that in the show notes, shows them pinching and zooming as well as scrolling and the ease of the interface with a really nice on-screen keyboard. And now, I was debating this with a few people, what that on-screen keyboard looked like. And we think it's Q Virtual Keyboard. So
interesting.
Nice.
We're pretty sure that's the one. About the device, they say whether you're opening an app, SSHing to a remote server, or displaying a dashboard, CutiePi's touch-friendly interface can help you with everything. Connecting a keyboard or a mouse is no longer mandatory. So, you can go check it out at the link that we have in the show notes, and sign up for updates on their main page, because this one might get a little fun.
So we get asked this question consistently in the email, and there's really no good answer. We get asked, what is a good Linux tablet, right? To you run Linux on. So the actual hardware is what they're looking for here. And, there's Microsoft Go out there, which is one of the later ones that people talk about. There's the Microsoft Surface Pro 1 and 2.
Just a bunch of Microsoft tablets.
It pretty much is. And there's a couple tablets that, of course, in the used market that you could pick up and run things like Ubuntu Touch on, for instance. In fact, you were showing us, Dalton, a Ubuntu Touch on the Nexus tablet, correct?
This is the Nexus 7 2013 only. If you have the 2012 with the textured back, that's not the one.
And is there any other tablets that UBports supports currently?
Well, there's the BQ M10 HD and FHD. Those devices shipped with Ubuntu Touch originally. So if you can find any of those, you can install Ubuntu Touch on them. Upcoming, though.
Yeah.
Bring that around the microphone. We have the Pine tab. Ignore the Windows logo.
So that is a developer's kind of kit, right?
Yes, this is a developer kit from Pine 64, which we extremely appreciate, of the Pine tab. So it's got the keyboard case that comes with it and the docking connector. This guy has an all-winner A64 in it, which is the same as the Pine book and the Pine phone. So
the only problem I see with CutiePi is they need to put Ubuntu Touch on it, but hardware-wise, this looks pretty slick. This is pretty cool. This is kind of what I would expect the specs to be on the Pine tablet that they are rumored to be working on out there, somewhere around this range of a tablet. And when you think about the functionality of tablet, and I think I've darn near owned every single one ever made, I get them. I'm super excited about it. And then it sits in a corner, usually collecting dust, because I'd rather do my work on a laptop or a desktop anyways. For most of the time, where I really find value in them is when I'm traveling. And I have to bring a work computer, but I want something that has, Linux on it that I can easily slip in the bag and not have to pull 2 whole laptops out in the middle for TSA to, scrutinize. So to me, that throwing a tablet or something small like in the tablet form factor in along with my work laptop is usually the way I go. And this would be something I could see easily being able to throw into your bag, connecting a keyboard to, and being able to get my Linux on even while I'm out and about.
It's certainly small enough and portable enough, and it appears that the case that they have the pictures of here is 3D printed. So build your own.
There you go.
That'd be interesting.
A little DIY kit? Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. They should totally do that. We'll send them an email about that.
According to China.org, Huawei is looking to create China's first open source foundation. Now, the organization has plans to bring in technology partners from all around, and the foundation is launching next month. Now, this is an interesting move by Huawei, given the timing of their recent snafu with the United States government and this, that, and the other. But larger, I think it speaks to a growing trend of all of these individual, we'll just call them what they are, competitors to Apple, that have been trying to establish themselves in the mobile sphere. And in this case, Samsung has been redeveloping all of their apps and trying to create an alternative to Android, and obviously Google themselves are trying to distance themselves from Android specifically and create their own thing again from scratch. So it kind of makes sense that Huawei would do the same thing. And what better way to do that than with an open source foundation? So based on interference from other countries, Huawei is looking to make its own foundation that will help push open source and not be tied to a single company that can be interfered with government. China and Iran-based companies or other countries caught up in sanctions or influence will likely join. It's going to be interesting how independent this can be given the countries that it's founding in, right? Yeah. If we were taking a look at this article and it was a Swiss-based company, look at all I'll say is look at a certain mail provider that exists inside of Switzerland and the kind of traction that they have gotten and the kind of respect that they have garnered from the open source and Linux community. I think that one of the things that Huawei is going to struggle with is the fact that this whole dilemma that they're in originally stems up from the very fact that people don't trust countries like China. People don't trust countries like Iran. People don't trust countries like, North Korea. Will throw them in there. And so it's going to be very difficult for them to get a successful product or a successful organization off the ground. That said, If we were talking about proprietary software, proprietary organizations, it would be a much more difficult sell. The interesting thing about open source is it really doesn't matter what country this is starting in. It really doesn't matter what the government wants to do. If the source code is available online and people can go through and audit it and decide for themselves what is secure, what isn't secure, it's why a lot of us are on Telegram, even though Telegram is an invention of Russia, right? I think that there's a very high potential for something like this to succeed. If you think about it, this could be Huawei opening an open source foundation specifically to target mobile operating systems and the mobile ecosystem. That is in a lot of ways, I think, what all of us were kind of hoping Android was going to be. Google, a large company, dumping a lot of money into a project or into an idea that could compete with other mobile operating systems. But this one is going to be open source. This one is going to be based on Linux. This one is going to be the operating system that the community uses. And I think if you look around any Linux conference or any Linux meetup, you'll find that the vast majority of people are in fact using Android. So to a certain extent, they were successful. The problem was, or is, I guess, rather, Google screwed it up, because they don't value privacy. And so what we need now is either an organization that values privacy, or it needs to just be handed out into the open and backed by a massive company like Huawei that can say, hey, we'll build the devices, we'll put them out there. If you don't believe it's secure, go check out our source code and verify for yourself. I think this has a potential to succeed. What do you guys think?
I think it's actually very interesting because they're also saying that it's not going to be like, this is a foundation that's not specifically just for like Huawei. It's going to be like a multi-company thing. So, but because of that, even more interesting. But I agree completely. It's interesting because if Huawei wasn't doing these things, it would basically like, I'm not going to care at all. But the fact that they're open sourcing their OS, they're creating an open source foundation, and they are embracing this. It's very interesting because it also kind of means that people are going to be more willing to consider their stuff anyway. Like, I would have never considered them in general because of the whole proprietary. Like, I don't want another proprietary thing. So it didn't really matter where they're from or who was doing it. I don't care about yet another proprietary system. But the fact that they're actually open sourcing everything, there's a lot of potential that I think if Huawei weren't doing this, I wouldn't care. But the fact that they are, I'm pretty interested to see what they do with this because I think there's a lot of potential there.
Well, the one thing I'll say is that it was mentioned in the article about the fact that the Software Foundation idea came up after the GitHub, the world's largest host of source code currently, was prevented users in Iran and other nations that were sanctioned by the US government from accessing portions of their surface. So what they're doing is they're basically creating their own foundation now that wouldn't have that potential to have a company like any company. It doesn't matter if it was Microsoft owned GitHub or any company out there. Obviously, if you do business with the US government and they tell you to stop, you're probably going to have a heavy influence to stop or therefore lose most of your business or any of your interest in the US. So they're trying to create something independent of that. My only fear and the only reason I would still hesitate here is if they create some, obviously the whole idea of this is to create a foundation, but if Huawei releases that can work on multiple things, software or hardware, if Huawei releases an open source hardware spec sheet and an open source software spec sheet, if they were to bring a phone in, I would be 100% on board. I would still be hesitant with them releasing a hardware, you're utilizing a hardware and software solution from Huawei, or really I'm hesitant with it with any company. And so that to me would be the ultimate, this company truly is out there to focus on entirely open source community and push that agenda forward if they were to do an open source hardware build along with that goes with the software. Because just because their OS has open source in it doesn't mean there's not microchips sitting inside the hardware. I'm not saying they would do that, but that's the possibility we're all would be afraid of. So having both of those would be the perfect combination. But to get to that point, you have to have a foundation. You have to have a bunch of companies willing to join it. It will be interesting to see what they accomplish. Dalton, you have a lot of experience in the phone world. What are your thoughts on this?
So the big question here of whether it's good for the open source ecosystem or not is whether or not you have the freedom to install your own software on their hardware, right? Because it doesn't matter if you can build all of their software for a phone if you can't then take your build of the software and put it on the phone.
Interesting.
So I think that's kind of where, even if it's all open source, it doesn't matter if you can't install your own builds, right? because they can still slip something in their build system or whatever it may be. And that goes for any company who's doing any of this stuff. Being able to not only verify the source, but verify that the source or the binary on the phone is the same or at least similar to what you can build is kind of the big risk aversion there.
Yeah, if they have the source code, that's a good point. If they have the source code available and you can use it in general, but you can't, and if you try to take the one you built and put it on the phone and it doesn't work, that's its own complication there. So there's potential for that to be like they have proprietary blobs that they didn't tell you about. Like that could be an issue. That's a very interesting point. And
the question is whether they go for the secure route or the more freeform route of, are they going to verify the entire boot chain? Are you going to be unable to touch that at all? Or can you, as it is on Android, unlock the bootloader and install your own stuff on some phones?
Right.
Yep.
On some phones. And it's actually kind of interesting because Huawei used to have unlocked bootloaders, like by default. Yeah. Like they used to just have them by default. And then they decided to lock them down and arbitrarily lock them down just because they felt like it. And their reasoning was like, because no one uses it. Like, how do you know? Like, that they unlocked the bootloader to change it. How do you know? And it was just kind of weird. But now they're kind of like doing a complete pivot from that initial thing because they were kind of put in a position that's it's interesting to see what happens because of the sanction stuff with GitHub and I guess sanction stuff also against Huawei when all the companies were having to take it out, and the solution that was touted as like the best solution that could be done is the open source, because it doesn't matter what the governments tell them to do, like, or what companies or whatever, as long as the stuff is open. There's the license like supersedes any kind of sanctions because it gives you the freedom to do whatever. So the fact that they've actually like seemingly are embracing that is pretty interesting.
So up next in the news, we have some. I guess it's sad news. It really wasn't for me because I feel like I've gotten everything I was going to get out of this game. Me and Dustin from the Ubuntu Budgie team played this game for a good month. The game is Rust, and they are basically removing their Linux support in here. Now, during that month where me and Dustin basically went out there, foraged in the survival game, built all these bases, built all of our equipment up, and then one day randomly hackers came in and destroyed the entire server, was the experience that I ended my love for Rust basically at that point, and we never played it again since. But this is a popular game out there that a lot of people, it used to be, a lot of people played from Facepunch Studios. And they did have early Linux support in there. This was one of the games that admittedly even I would say, hey, we have Rust on Linux before we got Steam Proton and things. So it was one of the games that we were excited to have on Linux. Normally, I would be taking this moment to beat up on Facepunch Studios pretty bad on this because why are you leaving Linux, man? Linux is the future. But they're doing it in such a nice way that I can't. They're actually, even though they're going to stop support for Rust, they're actually doing a special system with Valve to refund everyone on a Linux platform that purchased Rust if you've at least run it in Linux once. So even if you're currently playing it on Windows and you have in the past run it on Linux, they're going to allow that refund system to refund you your total money for the game. And I thought, well, that's pretty nice. But then they went even one step further in their article and said, hey, use the money we're refunding you to go buy a game that has native Linux support out there, which was a pretty nice thing to say as a developer. I feel like they've handled this whole thing pretty well. So come September, you'll be able to go refund your money from Rust. And it doesn't matter how long you've played, how many hours you've put into it. You can still get a refund as long as you've played it in Linux once.
So what if you never played it at all, but just in no time whatsoever?
They suggest that you at least run it once because Valve's record keeping apparently isn't always great. And if you've not played it recently, you may want to go ahead and just boot it up for a moment in Linux, just because that will give Valve will have the latest records that you've at least run it in Linux before.
Yeah.
Because they said part of the problem they're running up to is Valve's record keeping on that, which I'm kind of glad they're not keeping records forever and ever on that information anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
This isn't great news. We're losing Rust, but I feel like you couldn't leave Linux in a better way than Facepunch Studios is, and I hope they'll reconsider. and come back
Well,
with another game?
I mean, that's very interesting. And the reason they gave last time, because the previous thing, like last week or whatever, they said that they were going to be stopping using support for Linux in being compatible with the Windows version, and their reason for that was anti-cheat.
Yeah.
So like, and it makes sense that the anti-cheat is a huge issue, because that's one of the reasons a lot of games are not even on Linux, is the anti-cheat.
That's why I stopped playing it, because of the cheating, right?
Yeah, and exactly, like the breaking into the system and stuff. So and also there was people they even made a report that said that people were breaking into Windows servers, not servers, but Windows people who were playing on the Windows version with the Linux version because they didn't have the anti-cheat in it. And it's unfortunate, and it kind of makes sense. And I do think I agree, and I definitely agree that the way they're doing it is like the least annoying possible way of doing it. You know?
Yeah.
It is sad that we're kind of in that the few ruin it for the many situation, where it's just a few cheaters that's kind of pushing everything over for them. But they've had trouble with their Linux builds for a while, and Unity hasn't been kind to them, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I've never actually played it. I did buy it a long time ago, and I never played it.
Well, go boot it up so you can get your money back, and then you can go buy this next game that Dalton's going to talk
right.
about.
And that's a fantastic suggestion.
So yeah, if you are bummed out about Rust and need your survival game fix now, you can check out the game Stranded Deep. This game describes itself as you take the role of a plane crash survivor stranded somewhere in the Pacific Ocean.
Ooh.
Come face to face with some of the most life-threatening scenarios that will result in a different experience each time you play. Scavenge, discover, survive.
Or
Nice.
maybe not.
Or don't. Game over.
Or maybe not survive at all.
So this is a single-player game, and it's made to play on Linux, and while it's in early access, they've already received some major updates recently, including a long list of bug fixes, new characters and UI improvements, difficulty settings, and giving you some more skills to learn so you can survive or not even better. And they've added a load of new animals to encounter as you try, vainly, to survive.
Nice.
Yeah, so this game, I have a feeling when I was looking at this that this would be a game that Noah would like, because we're still trying to get Noah fully into the gaming thing, and I feel like a survival game is kind of up his alley here.
Listen, I'll 1v1 you any day, bro. I'll no scope you.
360 no scope.
You no scope in this
He's got
game.
the terminology down.
Yeah,
so
360 no scope you.
360 no scope.
You know where that? Let me tell you where that comes. You know where that comes from. This predates Destination Linux, but it was the last
14-year-old?
year I remember that to get me into gaming. Yeah, actually, you're not wrong. And I asked, I said, so how do you get into gaming? They said the first thing you have to know is trash talking. Like that's before you do anything else. Doesn't matter how well you play, how bad you play. The first thing you have to understand is trash talking. I said, well, give me a list. So they gave me a list, and I wrote them all down, and I've saved them in trashtalk.txt, which is a file that I have. And
That's
I just open
amazing.
it up and read off of it. Yeah,
I love
perfect.
it. That is good advice. Well, if you're looking to play this survival game, it'll cost you $14.99. And so that would be a perfect use of your refunded Rust money out there. All right, this week in the software spotlight, I'm bringing back UKUU. So UKUU is a very powerful tool that will let you test the latest kernel on any Ubuntu-based distro out there. Now, Teejeetech provides it for free, but there is a version with a smooth interface that is $12. I would say it's worth every penny from the screenshots that I have seen of it, but I paid my $12, and you're supposed to get the application in like 6 hours or something afterwards, he says, but I still haven't gotten mine. But that's okay, because the regular one without the fancy interface does everything I need it to do anyways, and UKUU is just worth it based on its own. But I do hope he fixes that system where he's sending the app out to those who do pay. And it gives you a lifetime license if you do spend the $12. But just the work that Teejeetech does out there, it's worth paying for any of these apps to try to support more of the work that they're doing, because he does AppTick, Group, Polo, Selene, Timeshift, UMixOS, Conky Manager, Battery Monitor, Discman. All of that is from this developer. So any chance you can get to give him money, whether you get something out of it or not, is worth every penny, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting topic because of like the fact that he does the it's a pay for commercial structure of open source software, and I think that a lot of these are great tools. And I kind of hope that he changes his his like bio on Twitter or something. So so instead of like, I'm a developer or whatever, it'll just say I make Groot, and that's it.
Nice. That's well done, Mike.
Thank you.
Our tip and trick this week comes from Brian. He writes in and offers this suggestion. Over the years, I have amassed quite the collection of bash scripts. I've written most of them myself, and although none of them are very complex, most are only a line or two. Using them saves me a great deal of time. For many years, I've kept them in my documents folder in a subfolder called scripts and had to enter the full path to run them. A while back, I decided to research the best place to store my scripts and where Linux would automatically find them when I simply run the script by name. Now I store them in /user/local/bin, which is the binary folder for individual users, and sync that folder across all of my personal machines using SyncThing. It's not that big of a deal. I know it won't be a major game changer for most people. However, I made that discovery and followed through, and I improved my daily workflow significantly. So I thought it'd be nice to share this with the community. Please keep up the good work, as I absolutely love the show. Brian from London, Ontario. That would be in Canada. P.S. I previously worked in broadcast and radio and have dabbled in podcasting. I now have a home studio and do some voiceover work on the side. If you ever need a guest host, please let me know. I'd be happy to take Michael's spot.
So wait.
I'm sorry, that Michael spot thing wasn't in there. I apologize.
Well, that's the most logical person.
It's a great suggestion. It's a great suggestion. It really is, because I think the user/local/bin is an underused folder to begin with. I think people actually placing binaries in the either user bin or just root bin, wherever, root binary folder, either of those places, I think they're underutilized. And I also think that the vast majority of us, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about on my show 2 weeks ago. I opened the show by asking how many people have downloaded a file and then deleted the file and then gone back and downloaded the exact same file again like a week later. And how many people knew that they were going to delete that, they were going to re-download that file at the time that they deleted it, right? Oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this, I need a backup script for rsync. I Google rsync backup script. Somebody has it there. I grab it, I throw it in production, whatever. Why not keep that script available? So the idea of having an actual bash script folder is fantastic. The idea of keeping that on your local machine so you have access to those scripts all the time, even better. The idea that you put those in an executable directory so that you can just call the script by typing the name rather than actually have to specify the path, even better yet. Let me offer one more tip. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, for the sake of discussion, that there was somebody out there that said, I really have a preference of storing my scripts in /home, /username, /other files, /things I need, /system files, /scripts. You could actually add that directory structure, that big long directory structure, into your bash profile, and you would or into the environment variables, and then you would have the ability to run those scripts from that directory as well. So there's a couple different ways to attack that problem. By far, Brian's is the best suggestion. I love it. Great tip and trick.
Yeah, love it. Thank you, Brian, for sending us that email. And we will keep you in mind as a guest host in future episodes. We have been known to call on our patrons before to randomly show up and help us with an episode. So you never know. And that's pretty much how Dalton ended up here. Was he reached out to me on Telegram. I'm like, hey, you want to be a co-host? He's like, that's not what we were talking about. And I'm like, doesn't matter. You want to? Yeah, of course.
Well, first it was, you want to do an interview? Yeah. You want to be a co-host? Yeah.
It worked perfect.
Nice.
A big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. We love our patrons and coffee supporters, so we just want to give a special shout out for your support. We do a live show for patrons, so come join us. If you want to be a part of the show, you can join for just $1. That's darn near free. You could find $1 in your couch cushions at least every month and join and get behind the scenes access to the show.
That's right. We're now on Ko-fi as a way to support the show. Ko-fi offers a nice monthly option that will allow you to have the same perks as Patreon. There'll be a link in the show notes and on our website to join Ko-fi. The perks include things like access to live shows as well as unedited version of the shows and our most sincere gratitude. Today, you would have, instead of getting the hour-and-a-half show that you're getting now, you would have gotten a almost 5-hour show. 4-hour show. Almost a 4-hour show. You'll have almost a 4-hour show. So really, you're only getting 25% of the show if you're not a Ko-fi supporter. For $1 That is I'm in Wisconsin right now. I am driving all over and taking my family to various places. We've gone through all sorts of different deals and coupons and this, that, and the other. No place have I seen a deal where $1 and you get 3 times the content. That's not a thing. It's a thing here.
Sell it, Noah. Sell it. I love it. Well, please get back with us and let us know what you think or ask any burning questions via numerous methods. Email comments@destinationlinux.org, our Telegram group, Discord, Twitter, Mastodon, and all the ways that you can find us on our website. And remember to send us a video this time as well. Send us a link to a video and we might include it in the show, and you might get some free swag if you put your address in that email along with that link to your video. So please keep the comments and questions coming. We love to read them and hear of ways we might be able to improve the show and get awesome, valuable tips and tricks and software suggestions and all of the great things you all send in to us.
Yep, and the fun doesn't stop here. We actually have our own content on our own channels. If you'd like to check it out, you can go to Ryan's content on youtube.com/DOSGeek, where he'll fill your brains with hardware, software, and all things Linux. You can check out Zeb's content out as well on youtube.com/ZebdyBoss. You can check out my content at tuxdigital.com, where I do in-depth weekly Linux news podcasts called This Week in Linux and other Linux-related content. You can check out Noah's content at AskNoahShow.com, where he does a weekly talk radio show at 6 p.m. or at 6 p.m. on Tuesdays. That's 6 p.m. Central specifically, and join him, and he'll answer your questions on Linux, tech, business, all kinds of stuff. You can check out Dalton's, where he's doing on UBports, or ubports.com for Ubuntu Touch. You can go to ubuntu-touch.io as well for the list of the devices, and you can find him on Twitter, and I think I remember it, Universal Superbox
Without the E's.
Without the E's. Okay.
Universal Super Box.
I like it. That's awesome. So also be sure to like that smash button and share the show on social media.
So everybody have a great week. And remember, the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Thanks, everyone.